like this is as relevant today as it was way back in the early 90s. This is honestly the best of both worlds. I think I really want one. Welcome back to Future Classics. Now today we're going to take a look at the groundbreaking Audi RS2. The RS2 was the car that kicked off Audi's performance car journey in the modern era. It was based on the Audi A8 Avant and it was debuted in 1994, and this car was the starting point for all fast estates. In the early 90s, Audi had had huge success in the rally racing world, but had never really managed to corner the market for the performance road car. So they called upon their stablemate Porsche and asked them to collaborate with them to create their very first performance car, which would be able to compete with the likes of BMW M and Mercedes AMG. And so the RS2 was born, built in the same factory at Zuffenhausen as the 911. And when you're looking around the car, there are so many parts made by Porsche. Looking at the fog lights, the wheels, the brake calipers. These wing mirrors are straight from a 911 964, and as you're coming to the badges at the back, it had the Porsche script on there right next to the RS and Audi badge. But the thing that made this car so special was the engine. Porsche made considerable modifications to the original Audi 5-cylinder engine, namely by giving it a bigger turbocharger, a bigger intercooler, a more aggressive cam, and better induction and exhaust. They also changed the ECU and gave it a special suspension setup as well. This car was an animal. Paired with an upgraded suspension and geometry setup to the all-wheel drive system, this 2.2-litre turbocharged engine produced 315 brake horsepower and over 300 foot-pounds of torque. This made the RS2 one of the fastest cars that money could buy in the mid-1990s, famously getting from 0 to 30 miles an hour quicker than a McLaren F1. It had a 0 to 62 time of just under 5 seconds, and that was on the way to a top speed of 163 miles per hour. It actually took Audi 10 years to create a car which was faster than this in the 0 to 62 department. Although the collaboration was considered a niche project, the RS2 proved to be popular, with just under 2,000 cars sold, but only 180 of those were sold to right-hand drive markets, including the UK. There were not many cars that were comparable of the era. If you were looking for a proper performance estate, the BMW M5 Touring was to arrive a little bit later. These cars rarely come up for sale, so working out the values of them at auction can be quite difficult. They've been sold anywhere between the mid-30s and all the way up to £80,000, completely dependent on the mileage, the spec, and the condition of the car. As an avid fan of the fast estate, I'm really excited to drive the one which started it all.
I came into possession of this RS2, a mix between my father found it and then I also became obsessed with the car. So my father is a big petrol head. I grew up with cars. He used to drive me to school in a 356. So really obsessed with Porsche. And I think if you're obsessed with Porsche, you maybe know a little bit about this car, you've heard about this car. And I think his favorite Sunday activity is browsing through websites, and he found it in Germany. And I had been living in London for 4 years now, 5. And he found it, first owner. It all sounded a bit too good to be true. So he sent a friend to go see it, and it was actually mint condition. And then he drove out to get it. I think he made it from the little town to where it was to Munich, and the car stopped. So he had to take it into the mechanic, blah, blah, finish his trip early. So then I was the one who went back to Germany and get the car. It's never stopped for me, it's always behaved. So I imported it into London. That's the story, and now I keep it with me. It's such a cool car. All of its features, the interiors, the color, the fact that I get to play cassettes on it. There's so many different quirks. Also just the speed is a very moody car. And I think that's what I love about driving it, is that maybe I don't know, not grocery shopping, but just like going somewhere. And you hit that place where you're like, oh, and the turbo kicks in and you're reminded that you're driving that car and that this is such a cool car. I think it's that sort of reminder for your everyday life. You get that a bit of adrenaline and a bit of that punchy when you're driving it. I am starting to see that people are recognizing the car on the street. So I arrived to a polo match and literally I was late, so the polo match was already going and everyone came to see my car, forgot about the match. So literally, it's starting to grab a lot of attention. I think for people that actually, even people that don't know about it, there's something quite striking about it. The car was a really big investment. They're really also going up in value, so I don't think I'll be selling it. But also it's the fact that it has become such a big part of my life now, that is that sort of emotional value that makes it really, really hard to part ways with it.
About you, but I am a massive fan of fast wagons. I'm currently driving an RS6 Avant, and to think that it all started with this car right here, the RS2. The collaboration between Porsche and Audi, going back to the early 1990s, Porsche didn't have a lot of money and Audi didn't really have a great performance car offering. So the fact that they then collaborated to create what is now essentially the first ever fast wagon blows my mind. Because you'll never ever see a collaboration like this ever again, where two manufacturers go head to head to create something which in itself was a class decider. As you're walking around the car, you can see so many things which are borrowed from Porsche. I mean, I love an early 90s 911, so 964 turbo era. And you can see the fog lights that have been molded into the front bumper. These wing mirrors, I mean, the car's styling itself is quite boxy. And then you have the teardrop mirrors, which don't necessarily go with the rest of the styling. But do you know what? It just made sense at the time. This wasn't actually the first time that Porsche had done a collaboration with another manufacturer. They had done the 500e with Mercedes as well. It's crazy to think that Porsche back then was actually not in a good financial way. So this collaboration made sense to them. Audi really needed to create a performance car and Porsche really needed the money. So when the RS2 was born, there were so many things that Audi have actually gained from this. The RS name itself was on suggestion by Porsche, which was obviously then born of their performance car outfit. You've got to understand how fast this car was for its time. It beat the Ferrari 348 V8 and then also the 456 Ferrari V12. People couldn't believe how quick it was. And it really did set the tone for many cars that were to come. The M5 Touring, which was to come a little bit later, was the only car that could really shine a candle to this. The thing with these old turbo engines is you have to really work at it to keep it in the power band. You're moving up and down the gears, you're revving it up and gearing down. It's a really fun and enjoyable ride. Now, it is really stable at high speeds as well. You can tell that this is an Autobahn muncher. I will say the steering is quite light, the car feels quite nimble. There's not a lot of steering feedback, but I think it is very much a car of its time. And I think when you're driving these, you have to remember that it is over 20 years old now. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that you have that delicious turbo boost feeling that, as Nina said, you get up on the revs and you feel it start to push in and you're just having so much fun whilst you're driving it. We've got to talk about the specification of this particular car that I have today as well. It is in the most desirable spec. It is RS2 Blue, which obviously a lot of us would know as Nogaro Blue when they offered this colour on later Audi models. And it's also got the Recaro seats with the blue inserts in it. This is a low mileage example as well, so this could fetch anywhere up to £80,000. It's very much a car which is going to increase in value. I know for a fact that Nina's never going to sell this car, so I guess value in a way is immaterial because it has emotional value to her. But these days, a well looked after, low mileage, great spec car, you can expect to be commanding upwards of 80 grand. It is a genesis for what was to be one of the most exciting car segments and one of the most well loved as well. I just love the way you just pick up speed and absolutely off you go. The all-wheel drive system connected to that 6-speed manual gearbox. It's a mile muncher, but also something that you can have so much fun in. The ultimate sleeper, some would say. My dad always told me that the best cars are the ones which are no show, all go, and I feel like this encapsulates this. Audi really did create, alongside Porsche with this car, an entire class of its own of wagons which were just supercar killers. I do believe that these are already a classic. I mean, what does it take to be a classic? Something that's going up in value, something that is first of its kind, something that is the beginning point of an entire class of cars. And the fact that it is still this much fun to drive over 20 years later, what's not to love? Well, it's time to give Nina back the keys to the RS2. Whenever I drive these cars, I realise just how special they are. This started a class of its own at the time. I mean, the fact that we saw two massive manufacturers come together to create something which went on to have such a legacy. The RS6 that I'm driving today all started with this. This is a very well maintained example and one of the best specs I've ever seen. So if you're looking to buy one of these or you're in the market for one, make sure you do your research, and trust me, they don't come up that often. So if you see one, I suggest you snap it up. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Future Classics. Can't wait to see you on the next one, and I'll see you soon.